Hello and welcome to Psyched, the show where we explore psychedelics through social, economic, and political perspectives. Magenta Seiba. She'll be talking on regenerative futures of psychedelic business. Magenta is an organizational development consultant specializing in regenerative business and equitable leadership. She directs Bloom Network, a global incubator for bioregional solutions to climate change and societal well-being. She advocates for decriminalization of psychedelics and respect for the autonomy of Indigenous medicine practices. Magenta, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Psyched.
My pleasure. Thank you for organizing this. I'm a little bit nervous, even though I can't see you all. So hello, my name is Magenta, and thanks for the intro, Merrick. And so through this talk, I'll be doing some regenerative futures forecasting, sharing about business opportunities in the emerging psychedelic space, and some kind of brass tacks, like practical stuff that we can do to support ethical development as more capital starts pouring in. I come to this from studying regenerative business design for the past 10 years, initially as part of Evolver social movement, which has now become Bloom Network. All of the local Evolver spores separated to form our own peer-led company and figure out a sustainable business model for the societal integration of our psychedelic experiences. So yeah, here's some highlights from that journey. So some of these practices I'll share with you support de-risking on the investor side, and they also support maintaining ethical goals on the entrepreneur side. And further, they support the ability to create healthy societies and not just singular cure pathways. And lastly, I'll also link you to some ways to support Indigenous leadership and sovereignty as more of the world turns on. So I'm going to start there with an urgent thing. I got an email in my inbox last night with links to this stuff, which is awesome. My connection with psychedelics comes from the plants and fungi. I actually haven't eaten the chemical versions very much yet. I got a note last night, and I've been thinking about this too, but the Shipibo people, so an indigenous community in Peru that are one of the main centers of ayahuasca tourism, and also a profound knowledge of the medicinal plants and psychedelic awareness. They're truly elders in this whole field in a way, and they are struggling right now because of COVID. Their main income is gone from the tourism and the patients coming from other places, and they're getting sick. And like a lot of places in the Amazon, the country government has not been sending them support. So I'm gonna pop in the chat here a couple links. One is a GoFundMe for Shipibs. Here is also a website of their leadership, and specifically kind of an announcement with a request to be consulted and economically respected as people host conferences and utilize the traditional medicines that come from the forest, etc. There's similar stuff happening in Brazil too, just on the respect of Indigenous IP and experience and economic and ecological well-being. So there's a pile of links for you. And just to share one quote from that Shipibo request for respect. There is a great risk that regulation, mainstreaming, and medicalization will lead to the concentration of legitimacy in the world of Western medicine and to the exclusion of Indigenous practices and communities. What is the point of these global conferences when our own communities are being destroyed and our knowledge and plant technologies are not being transmitted intergenerationally amongst our own people. So that's something to keep in mind over the coming years. I imagine a lot of the venture capital development will happen in the space of chemical medicines and clinical contexts, but I think that it's important to think really big picture and know that we have tools, economic tools, financial mechanisms for not further colonizing the space of our health. And there's some lot of really beautiful things that can be done toward that. Just tying up the thread on the COVID stuff, I've also heard that specifically in the Putumayo region of Colombia, people are struggling there. And the Navajo people in the US have been hit really hard. A lot of them are getting sick. So if you benefited from the healing knowledge of specific Indigenous groups, I'd recommend checking in with their contacts to them and asking how you can support right now. So that being said, I'm going to hop in a little bit into some of the details of regenerative business design and get into the meat of specific types of entities and ownership structures that can help with long-term return on investment. And more generally, how regenerative business model design can be profitable. If regenerative is a new concept to you, generally it's the opposite of extractive industry. So you create the conditions for more life, more diversity, and more capital, but it's connected to land and society's well-being. I'm seeing evidence in the long term that regenerative business models often outperform typical investments, partly because their longevity rate as companies tends to be much longer, and they also create the environmental conditions that nurture their growth, as well as buffer impacts to shock. So I'm going to start with cooperatives. Cooperatives are a pathway for democratic ownership and development of a business. They often have a social concern for the broader community, and they develop with that in mind. So an interesting statistic here, less than half of all businesses survive the first 5 years, and only 25% of businesses make it 15 years or more. But cooperative survival rate is much higher. So when you have the workers and other operationally involved stakeholders owning the business, they are financially invested and also feel a sense of stewardship over the endeavor. They want it to survive. Cooperatives are proven to be resilient to economic downturns and recessions and other kinds of disruption. And we're going to increasingly have situations like that as climate change and political instability rises. So in fact, from my perspective, regenerative business design is a way to reverse those cycles. So I'm going to do a little slide share just to help you grab onto some of the phrases that I'm going to be using in describing different types of cooperatives. So you guys are seeing the slides, right? Not my notes. All right, I'm gonna keep going. So one type of cooperatives are multi-stakeholder cooperatives. So these are where you have multiple types of members. So you have the member owners, which could be the patients. You have the doctors and practitioners as worker members. You might have suppliers and clients who are also invested owners in your company. It's possible to set it up that way. And you still have investors who receive return on their investment in multi-stakeholder cooperatives, but usually they're not given voting rights. And this helps the long-term stability of the enterprise. One of the common issues in VC, at least in tech, is that the founders often have a purpose for which they're building a company, but frequently with a VC ownership structure, that purpose is scrapped and the business used for parts in the interest of increasing capital. And so if you're a new entrepreneur, just FYI, there are lots of ways and lots of funds out there to prevent that from happening if that's a really strong part of your ethical compass for why you are getting into the business. I'll touch on some non-cooperative examples of that as well here. All right, so another type of cooperative are platform cooperatives. And actually, let's see, I'm gonna switch my screen share to my Actually, I'll just grab a link here. So there is one of these called, so a platform cooperative is basically just like a company that's based on internet, and rather than like a physical clinic, and where the users and or a multi-stakeholder cooperative, but often it's the users who have ownership in the platform. So one of the examples of this is Savvy Cooperative, which is a healthcare data platform. And I think there is a opportunity to do something like this in the psychedelic space in terms of clinical therapy that would both be economically viable and also incredibly valuable to all of us. Another example of a platform cooperative is Stocksy. Let me grab the URL for that real quick here. And that is it's like a stock photography site that is owned by the artistic contributors. So they get something like 50% of all the sales on the stock photography. I'll just scroll down, you can see a little bit of it here. So I think there's a potential to see a business like this, a cooperative specifically for psychedelic art and music. I have a couple of notes on that I want to share. Because I mean, more as psychedelics become legal and we have more people eating them, etc., people are going to consume more psychedelic art, film, and music, and they're going to use that to boost their own sales. So they'll kind of play into the aesthetic just for financial reasons. So that's a couple interesting things about platform co-ops. You can also federate co-ops, by the way. So you can interconnect them so that together they're stronger. And again, it buffers some of the risk and downturns in your cycles of developing a company. A few examples of community-led investing. So WePower in Atlanta, they're actually a VC fund that is, they work with the neighborhood, like just people who live in an area, to decide what businesses that they want to see there. So they already know that the market there is for them. And again, it contributes to longevity of place and equitable and financially empowered community, which I think is a pattern that would be really amazing to see as we develop more psychedelic businesses. So again, they're called WePower in Atlanta. And there's another example called participatory budgeting. So a lot of cities do this. Vallejo, California does it to great success. And so in the context of a company, it could look like, or a fund, allocating 3% of your profits to a participatory budgeting pool that your members or clients, patients, etc., can directly describe what kind of offerings that they would like to be developed with that. Which obviously is beneficial for your business, and also, you know, incentivizes people to stay involved and stay in your business and not someone else's. There's also, touch on this briefly, you can set up hybrid entity structures to cycle capital. So a common way to do this is you'll have a for-profit arm, you'll have an impact business arm for investing, and a nonprofit or philanthropic arm. And again, sometimes people do this purely for financial reasons, because sometimes developing non-commercial aspects of the ecosystem is ultimately financially beneficial for you. There are a lot of big consortiums in industry that do that. And then sometimes it's from an ethical reason, like it gives you a way to, and a legal structure to cycle capital into stuff that you really care about. Let's see. And similar to that, you can do that not within one entity cluster, but within a larger ecosystem. I believe there's the opportunity to create pooled funds among psychedelic business practitioners and investors. So you could do things like set up a fund for access for economically disadvantaged people to be able to have clinical experiences that, you know, for now are not covered by insurance and that kind of stuff, and to be able to get care. And then that has like cascading effects of like more talent released into the general like intelligence and creative pool of humanity, and addresses the inequality, which is like a huge issue, and there's a lot of intergenerational trauma and systemic oppression and all of these things. If we can start to design our structures of business with that in mind, I think is like very possible. And hiring BIPOC people and women into these companies and into the funds themselves. I follow a lot of people on VC people on Twitter right now, and a huge part of the conversation is hiring, I forget the words for them, like LPs or partners, people to help direct the funds who are women of color and Black women. And that is just hiring people straight up is like the easiest way to get that equitable development and wealth redistribution to happen. And so I know not everyone who's going to get into the space of psychedelic business is going to have that kind of ethical compass, but I think a lot of us do. I mean, when we have these psychedelic experiences, we have political and ecological and societal kind of breakthrough awarenesses of seeing outside of the structures that we are kind of have grown up in, and even in countercultures that are different from that, and know that there are other ways of doing it. So really want to encourage us to like think big about that. DAOs are also another way that you can make pooled funds. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's using the blockchain and smart contracts to kind of automatically allocate capital to things and or govern pools of capital easily. It's good for trading across international borders, for example, and all kinds of stuff. One of the things I'm also curious about is like ways to secure compensation for Indigenous peoples for their IP. I'm just sort of starting to learn more about that space a little bit from the textiles direction, because I know a lot of different Indigenous people in different places have their traditional patterns kind of copied by large fashion companies who make tons of money off of them, but they're, especially as the aesthetic of this becomes more trendy, this is just increasingly going to either be a problem or we can like find good solutions for it. And so I know there's like a women's weaver collective in Guatemala that's working on it. But obviously when it comes to medicine, like, you know, extractions and derivatives from the plant sources themselves to make pharmaceuticals, I think we have an accountability and responsibility together to, you know, make sure that that capital cycles back to the very fabric of the planet and the cultures that are stewarding these places and have made those medicines possible. So I'm really interested in consulting in that space and deepening my own practice and understanding how to be with that in a good way and ferry information back and forth. I get a lot of questions from Indigenous leaders that I interface with in different coalitions and stuff about how to use blockchain and cryptocurrencies to their advantage for governance and local economic sovereignty. So if that's a space you're interested in, I'm like really happy to be in contact with you about it. Let's see, we've got just a couple minutes left here. What do I want to touch on? Yeah, non-cooperative stuff, just FYI, if you haven't come across this stuff before, B Corps are a way to achieve a triple bottom line or whatever bottom lines you want. I think just it makes it legally possible for you to not make decisions that maximize shareholder value. You can just, it gives you more leeway. Purpose Company, that's made by Derek Razzo, who's one of the original Inspiral founders. I'm gonna actually post that link in the chat too, if I can get it here. That's another way to kind of, I can't get the chat right now, but I'll pop it in a second. Also, I would love to see a distributed medicine manufacturing DAO. If you do this, I will give you my time. I think there's a lot of potential in the field of medicine for distributed, localized production, which can be part of redistributing wealth and making sure that our we're creating the, I don't know, structures for survival and economic well-being of the regions in which we're living. And so if you have micro manufacturing plants, even if you just think, for example, of mushrooms like cordyceps and reishi and lion's mane and this kind of thing, encouraging small scale grows of that and doing peer-to-peer investing is like one way to get that happen, because it's basically mostly would be probably micro enterprise stuff. That's something I'm really excited about too. Yeah, I'm gonna close up here. That's my email address if you want to get in touch. Also encourage you to check out Sage Integrative Health in the Bay Area. I think they're a really incredible model for integrated care. They have multiple different types of practitioners who have relationships with each other, and they have like community healing nights and gatherings. And like one of their emails they sent me had a recipe for nutritive broth with like dandelion greens and burdock, and it made me so happy. Like, I know not everyone's like hippie and plant medicine based in this world, but I think that the potential for that kind of model of care and really innovating our models of care, our models of insurance and so forth, it's just like a really exciting time to put attention into that and share with each other what we're finding as beneficial. So just to conclude, I think that a lot of these kind of regenerative business structures, both finance mechanisms and kind of the ethical stuff I've kind of dug into a little bit, will help your business attract more patients and make you more competitive. And they have the potential to be less risky investments because of the longevity that these types of businesses have. And yeah, just hope to see an increased evolution as a psychedelic business emerges as a field. Thanks for listening to me yammer on. Happy to hear some questions.
Hey, Magenta, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time and insights. I'd love to start off just hearing and diving deeper into kind of how Indigenous communities can be using cryptocurrencies, blockchain, to be able to protect their medicines and their knowledge. I know it's something that's been talked about a lot in the ecosystem. So any insight would be truly wonderful to hear.
I mean, the first thing to say is I think what I've seen is that Indigenous folks tend to adopt technology incredibly quickly. Like their level of understanding of how to use it is like for some reason way higher than the average people I talk to, like farmers and artists and stuff like that, who are also interested in it. So, and I think the other, I mean, there's some ecological precedents. There's a blockchain company called Regenerative that is making a way to use carbon credits. They're doing a test run with Indigenous communities to protect the boundaries of their territory from being encroached by deforestation. So basically by doing that kind of forest protection, they're able to get the money from carbon markets, and that helps them put resources into, bringing in lawyers who understand things or educating their own people in law. There's also a huge wealth of wisdom in the realm of native jurisprudence, so Indigenous communities' own law systems. And one person I'm in contact with who is in a coalition of those kinds of folks asked to like really lean into them and ask for their guidance, because they have a lot of kind of better understanding of how to adapt laws that support like ecological health of a region. To setting up the line of communications is the other thing I would think. Like I have a couple of specific people who have asked me questions, but I am a little bit too new to the space to like yet go to them and be like, here are the people you should talk to, etc. So I think a good first step would be like finding each other, the folks who are interested in that, and kind of putting together a little bit of legwork together first, but then like opening up that bridge of communication.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience is, where are you working out of? Where are you located?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm in Manchester, New Hampshire right now. I just moved here. I was in the Bay Area for like 15 years, so kind of near Boston, New York right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that a lot of these things that you're describing, they're picking up steam, or are they kind of still in the darkness? There needs to be a lot of push for people to even recognize that they exist. I guess like how close are we to transitioning to these models that clearly are more effective?
Oh, I mean, they're growing fast. I'm actually in a class right now from the New School in New York. They're Platform Cooperatives Consortium, along with Mondragon, which has been fucking incredible to be in a class with like Mondragon leadership. That's like the biggest cooperative in the world, I think. It started in like 1950 in Basque region of Spain. And I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but the worker co-ops are growing. Conversion of existing business entities to worker-owned cooperatives are growing faster than that even, especially as boomers start to retire. There's a lot of policy innovation happening. This class at the New School had well over 1,000 people who wanted to take it. There's like 455 people in the class. It's on platform cooperatives, and we're kind of like squad moding like development and acceleration of that space in our initiatives. And this is the first time they're kind of just getting going there. But obviously with COVID and continued economic downturn, we just had like a huge transfer of wealth again, siphoning off of like the increasing wealth inequality just underwent a massive like continued stratification. And so you're out of necessity, co-ops are a lot of co-ops originated from situations of depression and recession and starvation, where people had to provide for their own needs and create an economic kind of buffer for that. And we're increasingly walking into that, and more people are doing it out of necessity, and also to not lose their jobs. Again, when like a founder retires from a company, they want to continue to work there, or as companies fall apart. Another way, if a company is going to die, a way to keep it going is to switch it over to a worker cooperative. That tends to work well, apparently.
What are some of the largest, I guess, criticisms or maybe resistance that you may have heard from kind of old school capitalists to these types of models? Yeah, would love to hear.
I honestly haven't run into too many of those people. Sometimes, I mean, I've had a hard time talking with those people because there's like sexuality stuff that always gets pinged on me. So when I'm talking to older men, I just had like terrible experiences on that front with talking to anyone, and that, like, I don't know what that was about. I've kind of stopped doing it, but or even like trying to have those kind of bridge conversations in that context. But the other thing is just so I'm in a lot of communities that are kind of coalitions of finance professionals working on this stuff and trying to find the business models. Like, they recognize there's a need for innovation and there are gaps, but they don't necessarily know what mechanisms are out there. So it's kind of, we just decided to start like a bi-weekly finance professionals meeting, working group through Bloom Network, to bring people together and share methodologies, including with blockchain folks. But that's a long-winded way to say that they just haven't had access to these things. There's a significant amount of people who are in the very straight, old school capital way who recognize that there are gaps. And so that's mostly who I interface, are like people who have recognized that there's something missing. So in the UN, or in VC world, and the VC world people I meet, that hybrid entity structure, what they're starting to do is do funds that have a straightforward VC, make lots of money arm, impact business arm, and then a philanthropic arm. So I haven't met many people who are super old school, more so the people who are like looking for what's out there, but can't find it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'd also love to know, in regards to these types of models, are these things that we're seeing much more in the US? I know that you said that there was one co-op that started in Spain. Are we behind, I guess, the curve, or are we ahead of it in everything that's happening? And where else in the world can we look for these types of models being able to bloom up?
It's pretty widespread across the world. I didn't hear a lot of examples from Russia. Mondragon has some people in China. In India has, I think, like the largest number of worker member owners. I forget. India has a huge existing landscape of that, but also like a huge untapped potential of it. Apparently, like with artisans in particular, like doing a decentralized form of Amazon or something, or like cooperatively formed version of Amazon it's like a really good move or play for them right now. Brazil, Argentina, Canada, Spain. Spain has a ton. There's a northern Italy has like, I forget the exact region, but 30% of all of their businesses are cooperative.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. Well, I think we're running out of time, but thank you for giving us perspectives on this landscape and all these cool things that are happening. I know it's been a really big question for a lot of people, so really appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Awesome. Yeah. Happy to help in the future too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Talk soon, Magenta. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.